So these housings in the tunnels could have been for the storage of the ore material, with cinnabar ore going into the tunnels below the Temple of the Feathered Serpent, the gold ore below the Pyramid of the Sun. Again, the sun, or the Pyramid of the Sun, is an alchemical symbol for the transformation of gold, and the silver ore being deposited below the Pyramid of the Moon. Yet another symbol telling you exactly what the structure is for.
All right, everyone, welcome back to the land of Chem. I'm your host and the author. My name is Jeffrey Drum. Thank you all so much for joining me again. All right, everyone, welcome back. And to all the new subscribers, thank you for joining. And everyone, thank you so much for your patience and support as we have been traveling literally every week for the past 2 months. And I've been doing my best to keep up with the content, but you will see why we have been so busy very soon. Now, today, I'm absolutely thrilled to finally be releasing my preliminary hypothesis on the function of the Teotihuacan Pyramid Complex, a lightning-powered, integrated system utilizing liquid mercury for the extraction and processing of gold and silver ore. Ladies and gentlemen, as always, thank you all so much for the support. I think that's it for today's intro. So without further ado, let's get right to it. All right, everyone, here we go with tonight's episode. Now, to begin, what you are about to see was originally a 3-episode series presented on the members-only Alchemist tier. But after my recent appearance on Matt Bell's Limitless podcast, part 1 of 3, now available, link in the video description below, the cat is out of the bag. And today I will be presenting the full research breakdown, including initial site and archaeological investigations, mechanisms of operation, and a spectacular Google Earth examination of the structure and surrounding landscape that reveals a white horse cumulonimbus thunderstorm generator system that provided the power source from lightning that drove this mercurial gold and silver extraction process. So now, ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, I hope you enjoy episode 177, the full function of the Teotihuacan Pyramid Complex.
Let's examine the configuration of the city of Teotihuacan. And yes, that's right. Teotihuacan is not just one pyramid structure, but rather 3 immense primary constructions that were the center of a massive ancient city. Also described as a religious or ritual center that even had extensive residential compounds. But for the purpose of my research, we're going to focus on the 3 critical components and a few secondary features. First, number 1 specifically, the Temple of the Feathered Serpent, Quetzalcoatl or Kukulkan, which are actually the exact same deity, one name coming from the Aztecs and one coming from the Maya, both referring to this feathered serpent god. Now, for those of you that have been paying attention, this should already be sounding familiar, as I have discussed the functional symbolism of the feathered serpent before, and it is directly connected to the operation of this complex. More on this in just a moment. Next, number 2, the Pyramid of the Moon, here at the end of the site. And structure number 3, the Pyramid of the Sun. Now, there are also 2 important secondary features. First, the Avenue of the Dead, very reminiscent to the Avenue of Sphinxes in Luxor, and, of course, a river running through the site here. And side note, if you haven't seen episode 130 regarding the function of the Avenue of Sphinxes and the step-down voltage transformer system, it is an absolute must-watch and directly relevant to the operation here at Teotihuacan. Now here is an image of the Pyramid of the Moon. This is the Pyramid of the Sun, and in my opinion, the most fascinating component of the pyramid complex, what remains of the pyramid or temple of the feathered serpent. Now some quick diagrams showing first the Pyramid of the Moon, in which several intrusive burials have been found. And here, the Pyramid of the Sun, that does have a long transverse tunnel running through the structure, and a well here, tapping into that subterranean water source. with a more detailed diagram of that tunnel, cave, and chamber system here. Now, an important note, at this stage in my research, albeit preliminary at this point, I have not discovered any information indicating the presence of highly engineered internal chambers within these pyramids that would be comparable to those of the Egyptian pyramids, which makes deciphering their function even more difficult and speculative. One of the main reasons that I have not publicly proposed a formal hypothesis for Teotihuacan, so for now, this is just for fun as a bonus for the members-only Alchemist tier. Now, a quick housekeeping item that I'll mention again later in this episode. The Alchemist tier is intended to be a fully customizable experience, with the Ask Me Anything episode being specifically intended to answer your questions, and this additional research video tailored to anything that you want me to discuss. So if you have a site you want me to look at, please feel free to propose that in the comment section below, and I'll add that to the list for future Alchemists-only videos. Now here, a size comparison showing the Pyramid of the Sun in yellow, the Central Pyramid of Giza, the Great Pyramid, and the Final Pyramid, just so you can get a sense of how big this structure really is. Okay, now let's jump into the research. And there seems to be a huge misconception about what has been discovered at this site. Everyone seems to think that the so-called River of Mercury was found inside one of the pyramids, but that is incorrect. It was actually discovered under the Temple of the Feathered Serpent, which is what you can see here in this diagram. Again, another indication that this may have actually been the focal point and most significant functional component of the complex. And if you haven't already figured it out by the name, the reason for this will become clear here in just a moment. And here, another cool digital image showing the tunnel system that was discovered below the Temple of the Feathered Serpent, which contains pools of liquid mercury. So now let's jump into two different articles. The first, pretty standard, just presenting the archaeological data as a foundation so that we can move forward. And the second, a bit more to my liking, presenting some fascinating studies from another brilliant researcher that is directly connected to my hypothesis for the function of the Egyptian pyramids. All right, let's start here. Liquid mercury found in pre-Aztec pyramid. And I'll read this here. An archaeologist has found, quote, large quantities of liquid mercury in a chamber beneath one of the oldest known pyramids in Mexico, The Guardian reports, located below the Temple of the Feathered Serpent. Again, not one of the pyramids. It's a different structure at the Teotihuacan site, the Temple of the Feathered Serpent, the third largest pyramid in the ancient city of Teotihuacan. So here they are referring to the Temple of the Feathered Serpent actually being a pyramid, and we'll see the remains of this structure here in just a moment and another proposed configuration thereof. So the find could herald the discovery of a king's tomb or a ritual chamber. They have no idea what it is, scientists say. The toxic silvery metal has been found at other archaeological sites in Mesoamerica, and because of its shimmering nature, may have been used to represent an underworld river or lake. Nonsense. The tunnel where the mercury chamber was found was unsealed for the first time in 1,800 years in 2003. So again, restating that here, an archaeologist has discovered liquid mercury at the end of a tunnel beneath a Mexican pyramid, a finding that could suggest the existence of a king's tomb or ritual chamber. Mexican researcher Sergio Gomez announced on Friday that they had discovered, quote, large quantities, end quote, of liquid mercury in a chamber below the Pyramid of the Feathered Serpent. Gomez spent 6 years slowly excavated the tunnel, which was unsealed in 2003. Last November, Gomez and a team announced that they had found 3 chambers at the tunnel's 300-foot end, almost 60 feet below the temple. Near the entrance of the chamber, they found a trove of strange artifacts, jade statues, jaguar remains, and a box filled with carved shells and rubber balls. Slowly working their way down the broad, dark, deep corridor beneath the pyramid, battling humidity, and now obliged to wear protective gear against the danger of mercury poisoning, Gomez and his team meticulously exploring the 3 chambers, shown here. Mercury is toxic and capable of devastating the human body through prolonged exposure. The liquid metal had no apparent practical purpose for ancient Mesoamericans. Clearly, they don't know anything about metal or mineral processing, but it had been discovered at other sites. Of course, Rosemary Joyce, a professor of anthropology at the University of California, Berkeley, said that the archaeologists have found Mercury at 3 other sites around Central America. But of course they have, as you will see in just a moment. Furthermore, here, Gomez speculated that the Mercury could be a sign that his team is close to uncovering the first royal tomb ever found in Teotihuacan, after decades of excavation and centuries of mystery surrounding the leadership of the cryptic but well-preserved city. The Mercury may have symbolized an underworld river or lake, Gomez postulated, an idea that resonated with Annabeth Hedrick, a professor at the University of Denver. The shimmering, reflective qualities of liquid mercury may have resembled an underworld river, not that different from the river Styx, Hedrick said, if only the concept that its entrance to the supernatural world and the entrance to the underworld. Mirrors were considered a way to look into the supernatural world. They were a way to divine what might happen in the future, she said. It could be a sort of river, albeit a pretty spectacular one. Joyce said that archaeologists know that scintillation fascinated the ancient people generally, and that the liquid mercury may have been regarded as somewhat magical, there for ritual purpose or symbolic purposes. Of course, the conventional explanation always given by archaeology. Hedrick said that mercury was not only the subject of fascination, a lot of ritual objects were made with reflective mica, a sparkling mineral likely imported to the region. In 2013, archaeologists using a robot found metallic spheres, which they dubbed disco balls, in an unexcavated portion of the tunnel, near pyrite mirrors. I wish I could understand all the things these guys are finding down there, but it's unique, and that's why it's hard. Water was also precious to many of the people in Mesoamerica who knew of underground water systems and lakes that could be accessed through these caves. Teotihuacan once had springs as well, though they are now dried out. Joyce said the ancient Mesoamericans could produce liquid mercury by heating mercury ore known as cinnabar, which they were also using for its blood red pigment. The Maya also used cinnabar to decorate jade objects and color the bodies of their royalty. For example, the people of Teotihuacan, for whom archaeologists have not agreed on the name, have not left any obvious royal remains for study. And lastly here, the discovery of a tomb could help solve the enigma of how Teotihuacan was ruled. And Joyce said that the concentration of artifacts outside the tunnels and chambers could be associated with a tomb or a set of ritual chambers. Once again, they have absolutely no idea what these structures were for. Now, to reiterate, this discovery is not associated with either of the 2 pyramids at Teotihuacan, not the Pyramid of the Moon and not the Pyramid of the Sun, but rather this temple dedicated to Quetzalcoatl or Kukulkan, the feathered serpent, which in both of these excerpts they are referring to as a pyramid structure. So they have discovered thousands of artifacts in this tunnel and at the site in general. But as I was reading this article, I couldn't help but be reminded of the tunnels below the stepped pyramid, in which thousands of these stone vases and other artifacts have been discovered. Originally, functional components of the structures, the tunnels below the pyramid, that were later repurposed as a repository and storage place for heirloom artifacts. And I think the same may have happened here in the tunnels below the Temple of the Feathered Serpent at Teotihuacan. Now, on to the second article written by Cliff Dunning from the Earth Ancients podcast, which I'll actually be doing an appearance on coming up soon. All right, everyone, I hope you're enjoying the video, and please remember to subscribe to the Land of Chem here on YouTube if you're interested in the physics and chemistry technology of a lost civilization and the function of the Egyptian pyramids and other ancient structures from across the world. Thank you all so much for the support. Now, back to the video. And this article, coming from the Ancient Origins website, entitled Uncovering Ancient Pyramid Science at Teotihuacan, Where Men Became Gods. And I'm going to read this whole thing as he has some really important details in here. First, regarding the mysterious tunnel, a reiteration of what we've already heard. In 2003, archaeologist Sergio Gomez was walking by the temple of Quetzalcoatl when he noticed a large crack in the ground approximately 20 meters from the foot of the stairs. Recent rains had opened a surface area, leaving a noticeable divot and exposing tourists to possible injury. Gomez, who had worked at Teotihuacan for over 30 years, inspected the site and determined that something curious lay underneath. Teotihuacan is considered an archaeological park, and most archaeologists know that every square foot of the land can hold artifacts and other important evidence of the past history of the area. Gomez, a member of the National Institute of Anthropology and History, received permission to investigate the area, and later that year assembled a team of experts who began carefully removing surface debris. Archaeological excavation is a slow process, and as they worked their way down, they uncovered a round shaft similar to a well, perfectly crafted of cement and stone. Interesting here, they notice that this well shaft was crafted of cement and stone. Furthermore, here, unknowingly, they'd uncovered the main access point to the original design of the complex that dropped over 40 feet down. As they descended down into the shaft, which opened into a cavern, they cleared over 400 tons of dirt, debris, and portions of discarded buildings, carefully looking for artifacts. Once in the cavern, they noticed the space had been carefully cut out of solid bedrock and opened into a large tunnel. Before the team began removing debris that blocked the entry to the tunnel, Gomez had the space laser scanned to determine its depth and other clues to its formation. The scans returned images of a precisely cut tunnel that ran more than 330 feet under the pyramid. The scans also revealed odd pockets or small repositories that dropped down from the main shaft and which had the appearance of small rooms. As the team began to excavate the tunnel, they made the first of many discoveries of artifacts and tools left by those they reasoned were the builders. At the 100-foot mark, 30 meters, over 50,000 artifacts were recovered, leading the team to consider a royal tomb was close by. This here sounding very familiar to the discovery of the vase cache located below the step pyramid in Saqqara. More here. Gomez had also noticed that the walls were covered in pyrite, which gave off a strange glow-in-the-dark effect in the unlit portions of the tunnel. Careful to check the remaining area, Gomez requested another laser scan of the tunnel to determine what lay ahead. To his surprise, the shafts ended in a cross-shaped enclosure, the center positioned directly under the highest point of the pyramid. Okay, now we're getting somewhere. As of this writing, the excavation continues in an attempt to discover a royal tomb, but there are a number of critical discoveries which point to the actual purpose of the tunnel system. First, it's believed the artifacts and offerings were left by the people who rediscovered Teotihuacan over 1,800 years ago and had nothing to do with the original design of the system, as I just said. A number of important clues offer us a glimpse to the original intent of the pyramid complex and other components which make up this discovery. Here, regarding the strange pyrite spheres that were discovered, the excavation team also found the first of a number of chemical and mineral deposits buried in the dirt. Hundreds of golden spheres were uncovered in various states of decomposition. They were composed of pyrite, fool's gold, and a mixture of adobe and crushed rock, an image of which you can see here. And here are some images showing the tunnel system below the pyramid or temple of the feathered serpent. And from what we saw earlier, it appears that there is a tunnel, cave, and chamber network running below all three of the primary structures at Teotihuacan. Now, this is where it gets even more interesting and connects directly to my work, starting here regarding the geomagnetic fields and pyramids. Recent discoveries in ancient pyramid engineering have suggested that a large number were designed as some sort of energy generators by different cultures around the world. In some locations, including Central and South America, construction techniques appear to have been shared. John Burke, a businessman and scientist, made an important discovery on pyramid electromagnetic energy in 2005. Burke had detected geomagnetic discharge at a number of North American and European megalithic and mound sites, including Stonehenge, Serpent Mound in Ohio, and a variety of smaller stone enclosures up and down the eastern coastlines. Using state-of-the-art scanning equipment, including a magnetometer and electrostatic voltmeter, he was able to determine that each location had been chosen because of its naturally occurring telluric energy field that pulsed up and into the structure or surrounding area. Sound familiar? What these sites were used for is anyone's guess, but we now understand that there may have been a positive effect on human physiology and greatly enhance crop seeds. What's baffling is how the builders knew how to find telluric fields without scanning equipment. Sensing there might be more to electromagnetic energy enhancement, Burke began scanning pyramid complexes in Central America, which were designed with a high level of precision. He would eventually learn about the specific pyramid at Tikal, an ancient Maya city in Guatemala, which was used by local farmers to enhance their seeds. Known as the Mundo Perdido, Spanish word for lost world pyramid, considered one to be the oldest pyramids in the entire complex. So now, the book where all of this information is coming from by John Burke is entitled Seed of Knowledge, Stone of Plenty, which was actually recommended to me by friend of the channel, Hugh Newman from the Megalithomania channel when we met about a year ago. And I read this book on my last flight to Japan, and it is absolutely fascinating with some very close similarities to my work. However, with a much different objective related to seed generation. And I actually have a ton of research prepared on this book that I haven't released yet, so this is also an option for a future Alchemist-only episode. If you're interested in hearing more about this book, please let me know in the comment section below. All right, now back to the article. Burke and his research partner discovered electromagnetic signatures that measured impressive charges at the top of the pyramid. Again, sound familiar? In a series of scans, the reading showed an average change of 908 volts over a short period of time, which was concentrated in the early morning hours. Burke mentions the readings and states these voltages might sound lethal, and if it were household current, they could be. However, static electric charge in the air is a different type of electricity, and even thousands of volts is not dangerous. His discovery of pyramid field generation is fascinating, but what he actually uncovered was a means of generating and perhaps distributing electromagnetic energy within a pyramid complex. What we don't know about the Lost World Pyramid is if it has other components built into its construction similar to the Pyramid of the Serpent. We now understand that a number of Maya pyramids, there are key components designed into their construction that act as magnifiers. What he's referring to here, I have no idea. These components appear to be important in creation, magnification, and distribution of telluric current fields. Specifically, here, he references water, either moving naturally, including rivers or cenotes, or by artificial canals or tunnels, similar to the Temple of Inscription found at Palenque. Geomagnetic fields, naturally formed telluric fields that have high and low periods throughout the day or night. As we discussed before, telluric currents are diurnal, moving east to west during the day and north to south during the night. Here, regarding the pyramid design, the specific pyramid shape appears to greatly enhance the telluric fields that pulse up and into the center of the chamber. Again, what chamber is he referring to here? I'm not sure, as no highly engineered chambers similar to the Egyptian pyramids have been discovered in any of the Mesoamerican pyramids. Regarding the pyramid interior fill, at a number of pyramids, rocks that are good electromagnetic conductors fill the interior of pyramids that are used to enhance the pulsing field. Rocks that have veins with quartz, granite, and other electrically conducting properties appear to be favored. Now, let me make a very important point of clarification here. Rocks, quartz, and granite are not electrically conductive. Let me say that again. Rocks, Quartz and granite are not electrically conductive. If anything, they are actually the exact opposite. They are insulators and dielectric materials. So what he's saying here is actually completely wrong. The chemical and mineral discoveries that Gomez made at the Pyramid of the Serpent may have the same properties found at Maya Pyramid and other locations, with a few twists. What made the pyramid run? As Gomez and his team were excavating the tunnel, they discovered watermarks high up on the wall. The marks run the entire length of the tunnel, indicating the space would constantly fill with water. The marks are almost black and appear to have been etched with some sort of chemical concentrate. What that was, he doesn't say. The transportation of water was delivered through the stone well shaft from the surface and directed to flow over specific regions of the tunnel. I actually somewhat agree with this hypothesis. Recent discoveries of mineral and chemical residue and the design of the well shaft, cavern, and tunnel system allow one to conclude that the underground system was designed to create some sort of discharge which may have taken place in the small chamber that leads to the main cross-shaped configuration at the end of the tunnel. Again, I hate when people use just arbitrary pseudoscientific terms like create some type of discharge. What do you mean by that? This is absolutely meaningless. This discovery of water, minerals, and chemicals has never been a consideration of Gomez or other archaeologists whose main goal is excavating the tunnel. Of course it hasn't, because archaeologists are always just looking for burials. There is no functional interpretation of these sites. In the last few years, the following chemicals and mineral combinations have been uncovered in large quantities throughout the tunnel system. Pyrite and pools of mercury have been uncovered, and a few years ago, radon gas was detected passing through a number of areas of the tunnels, requiring workers to wear protective breathing gear. If you combine these elements and a geomagnetic telluric field, the effect may be many times what was detected by Burke at the Lost World Pyramid. This is a profound discovery. An ancient, unknown science designed to create energy directed upon and up into the pyramids is fascinating to be considered and must be analyzed further. Unfortunately, we are left with more questions than answered. Who were the builders of Teotihuacan? And I'm actually looking forward to discussing this article during my appearance on the Earth Ancients podcast with Cliff coming up very soon. Okay, so the mystery deepens, and all of this sounds really familiar to what I have been presenting regarding the function of the Egyptian pyramids as related to chemical production and mineral mining. So now, let's put some of the pieces together. So first, the power source, which should be pretty obvious by now, as the Temple of the Feathered Serpent is telling you exactly what and where it came from. With the god Quetzalcoatl or Kukulkan, the feathered serpent, descending from the sky, down upon the structure and down the staircase, representing lightning being discharged from the sky. And when I was looking at the ruins of this temple, I was reminded of the solar temple at Abu Ghraib, which once featured this massive obelisk or lightning rod at the top. Again, these articles keep referring to this temple as a pyramid. And unfortunately, we don't know the original configuration of this Kukulkan Quetzalcoatl lightning rod temple, so that will forever remain in the realm of speculation. However, we have seen other direct evidence connecting lightning to these Quetzalcoatl temples and pyramids. Remember, from back in Members Only Episode 6, one of my all-time favorite videos, I revealed how the descent of the feathered serpent at the Pyramid of Chichen Itza during the spring equinox signaled and symbolically represented the arrival of the feathered serpent god. Quetzalcoatl, Kukulkan, both the feathered serpent, or rather lightning, descending upon the pyramid, which they directly connected to the beginning of their agricultural season, when rain, thunder, and lightning storms arrived, bringing with them the atmospheric fertilizers that nourish the land. Stated nicely here, folklore tells us that on the equinox, Kukulkan descends from the sky to the earth, bringing with him the energy of the sun and the gift of water for planting. Sounds a hell of a lot like a thunder and lightning storm to me. It is as though the feathered snake is an umbilical cord that provides nourishment to the land. Its vibration energizes the earth, preparing it for new growth. This, of course, being directly connected to atmospheric fertilizers produced during lightning strikes and a phenomenon known as electroculture. Kukulkan, Quetzalcoatl, this feathered serpent god, is lightning. And the title of this feathered serpent temple at Teotihuacan is telling you exactly what it was intended to do, which is receive this electrical energy from the heavens and distribute it throughout the complex via the Avenue of the Dead, just like what we have seen at Avebury through the Stone Avenues, at Luxor through the Avenue of Sphinxes, and on the Giza Plateau utilizing the Iron Vein Network. All the same technology, all the same knowledge, all the same power source. So next, we have the Pyramid of the Moon and the Pyramid of the Sun. Well, as soon as I saw this back in the day when I first started looking at these structures, I already knew what this temple complex was for, as the sun and the moon are alchemical symbols. Once again, this is a massive industrial scale chemical manufacturing and metal processing complex, but here being directly associated with gold and silver. And I'll read this here. The sixth key of Basil Valentine shows the chemical wedding of the king and the sun, the queen, or the moon. The sun and the moon are major symbols in alchemy. They represent the two most precious metals, gold, symbolizing the sun, and silver, symbolized by the moon. They also represent sulfur and mercury, and are often depicted as a couple bound together in marriage or as a mother and father of the philosopher's stone. So here at Teotihuacan, we have the Pyramid of the Sun for extracting and processing gold, and the Pyramid of the Moon for silver operations, which both of these may have involved mercury, which we've already found at the complex, and possibly sulfur compounds like sulfuric acid. And here is a cool GIF, or GIF, however the hell you pronounce it, showing what happens to gold in mercury, which is a process called amalgamation, where gold is literally absorbed by the liquid mercury, which is one way to perform gold extraction from ore. That mercury amalgam can then be heated and the liquid mercury distilled off, leaving the pure extracted gold in the retort, as you can see here with the following components. You have the fire or heat source, the mercury amalgam retort, a sturdy iron pot in which the mercury gold amalgam is boiled to separate the gold from the mercury. You have the mercury vapor condenser, which cools that vaporous mercury, condensing it back into liquid mercury in this receptacle for collecting the condensed mercury. And I'll read a little bit more of the details here. In the process of mercury amalgamation for gold extraction, mercury binds to gold particles, forming an amalgam, a mixture of mercury and gold. This amalgam is then heated, causing the mercury to evaporate, leaving behind the concentrated gold. This method is commonly used in artisanal and small-scale gold mining. A little bit more detailed breakdown here. Gold ore is typically crushed and processed to release the gold particles. Amalgamation. Mercury is added to the gold-containing material. It binds to the gold particles, forming an amalgam. Next, the concentration. The mercury gold amalgam is then collected, often by gravity or by using a sluice box. Heating and distillation. The amalgam is heated usually in a retort over an open flame, causing the mercury to evaporate. And then the final stage of gold recovery, mercury vapor is collected, and the remaining gold is left behind as sponge gold or concentrated gold. Now, this process is extremely toxic, and it would certainly make a lot of sense that you would want to encapsulate it within a massive structure to prevent fatal mercury vapor or sulfur oxides from leaking into the atmosphere. Exactly what I proposed in episode 27 regarding the function of the pyramid body, which also applies here to the function of the pyramids and temples of Teotihuacan. And we know from ancient legends like the city of El Dorado that this lost Mesoamerican civilization had immense quantities of very pure gold. And it would certainly make a lot of sense that they had developed industrial scale facilities for the extraction, processing, and purification thereof within the pyramid complex of Teotihuacan. These two metals, gold and silver, may have also been combined somewhere in this facility to produce electrum. So, generally speaking, I wouldn't be at all surprised if they find out that this cave, tunnel, and chamber system below these structures are all interconnected. And I would almost bet that further scanning or excavation of the pyramids themselves would reveal actual internal chambers of some sort. All right, everyone, I hope you're enjoying the video. And if you want to help support the channel, you can pick up a copy of the book and grab some merch at thelandofchem.com. The second edition Egyptian blue version is now back in stock. Same text as the first edition, just a new color design and a brand new merch drop. Inazuma Kagaku, lightning, chemistry. Absolutely gorgeous kanji calligraphy designed by my Japanese tattoo artist Shin at Funky Guns in Kobe, and all of your favorites, including stickers. Links to everything in the video description below. Thank you all so much for the support. Now, back to the video. In part 1 of the series, I presented an analysis of the configuration of the Teotihuacan, Quetzalcoatl, Kukulkan Feathered Serpent Temple Complex, and my hypothesis that the structures were utilized for the mercurial extraction and processing of gold and silver ore. Now, as I mentioned in part 1, the main difficulty in finalizing a formal hypothesis on the function of these structures is the atrocious lack of archaeological data and documentation. For example, there is article after article talking about the so-called discovery of pools of liquid mercury below the Temple of the Feathered Serpent, but there is not one single legitimate archaeological image from any formal report anywhere on the internet showing these, quote, pools of liquid mercury, end quote. Not one single photo. Only fancy 3D models and other computer-generated images, some of which I've used in these presentations, but absolutely zero documentation of any evidence to support these claims. This is a major problem. Also, the pictures, LiDAR, or mapping of this tunnel system is unbelievably lacking. Only vague images like this, showing some ongoing and frankly what looks to be staged archaeological work. And pictures like this that have no explanation or description whatsoever, nor is there any formal published research article or paper documenting the archaeological excavations or discoveries. Again, this is a major problem. So please keep in mind, again, for the purpose of this episode, I can only provide intuitive speculation on the function of this site, as in comparison to Egypt and the Egyptian pyramids, there is a blatant and seemingly intentional lack of documentation elucidating the impetus for the engineering and process flows of these systems. But I will do my best to work with what we have during this video. These alcoves in between these partitions that you can see here, for example, may be original, or they may be a part of the archaeological excavation process as they broke through the blockages that are noted on the tunnel diagram that you will see in just a moment. So remember from the last episode, we talked about the Avenue of the Dead running through the Teotihuacan complex that you can see here, operating like the Sphinx Avenue step-down voltage transformer system for the reduction and distribution of high voltage electric current from lightning into different areas of the complex. Well, here at Teotihuacan, there are no surface features like the Sphinx or any stone avenues that would indicate the electromagnetic induction voltage reduction process. However, as soon as I saw this hotep here in the center of the complex, I was once again immediately reminded of the solar temple at Abu Ghurab, with this calcite crystal hotep in the center. And remember from back in episode 113, seismic readings were taken of this hotep that indicate the flow of subterranean water below this component. And that is exactly what I think was happening here at Teotihuacan. As we have a source of water, the San Juan River, running through the complex, and many wells across the complex that have been discovered. The loam soils below these structures from which the tunnel systems were excavated also have moderate thermal, hydraulic, and electrical conductivity, all useful features when evaluating the potential function of the temple complex. Also, you can see here, there are several blockages in the tunnel, like I just mentioned, that may have resulted in the formation of those alcoves, or perhaps those alcoves are original features. Again, there is absolutely zero archaeological explanation anywhere on the internet for us to make that determination. But we also do see these transverse caves and other things indicating potential connections into other transverse tunnel systems that would connect the various structures of the Teotihuacan system. Again, all of this is speculative due to the appalling lack of archaeological images inside of these tunnels and proper documentation of any of their discoveries. Next, let's go back to the configuration of the site. So the Pyramid of the Sun is the tallest structure in the Teotihuacan complex. However, as explained in part 1, I can't help but get the impression that the base of the Temple of the Feathered Serpent, the destroyed remains of which you can see here, was originally just like Abu Ghurab, another similarity between these two structures, where today we only see the base, but the structure originally featured a tall obelisk type component. And given what we know about Kukulkan and Quetzalcoatl, symbolizing the descent of lightning, the arrival of the feathered serpent god, let's assume that this obelisk feature was present and that this temple was the part of the structure that was being struck by lightning. As always, the name of these structures are telling you exactly what they were for and how they operated. And there is a good reason that the facade of the Temple of the Feathered Serpent is covered with this imagery. It is telling you that this is the place where the lightning dragon god descended from heaven to earth. So we have the configuration of the site here. Now let's add some subterranean shafts running below the Avenue of the Dead. Again, a simple GPR scan of the entire site could corroborate or negate this hypothesis. This underground shaft system could be filled with water coming from the San Juan River and act as our electrically conductive wiring of the temple complex. Remember, pure water, distilled water, for example, is not a conductor of electricity, but mineral and spring water, naturally occurring water sources, are a great conductor. And that is exactly what we find at all of these ancient sites across the planet. Next, we also have the tunnel system running below each pyramid and connecting the various components of the network. And I'm sure you can see where this is going. Lightning strikes the Temple of the Feathered Serpent, distributing the electric current down the Avenue of the Dead into the various components of the temple complex. And as much as I hate images like this, where people make vague comparisons with no explanation whatsoever of how this system works, well, I just showed you where the current is coming from that drives this whole Teotihuacan Serpent Temple Complex circuit board. Next, these housings, that you can see here, we know that the Mesoamericans knew about cinnabar, Mercury ore. The paint from which it was made is found all over Teotihuacan and in tombs like that of the Red Queen. A very interesting similarity to similar containers that we discovered during our research expeditions in Japan. So these housings in the tunnels could have been for the storage of the ore material, with cinnabar ore going into the tunnels below the Temple of the Feathered Serpent, the gold ore below the Pyramid of the Sun. Again, the sun, or the Pyramid of the Sun, is an alchemical symbol for the transformation of gold, and the silver ore being deposited below the Pyramid of the Moon. Yet another symbol telling you exactly what the structure is for. All right, everyone, I hope you're enjoying the video, and please remember to subscribe to our 3 other channels. My wife Alexa's channel, Archeoalchemy, our mutual international travel and culinary adventure channel, Let's Go with Lex and G, and the best channel on YouTube, Egyptian Trash Cats. For all you cat lovers out there, ladies and gentlemen, as always, thank you all so much for the support. Now, back to the video. Pyramid of the Sun. There we go. All right. Now we are in business. And like I was kind of mentioning there, there's something very specific that I'm looking for in this investigation. And of course, I have a hypothesis for the existence of this specific component, but we're going to kind of review what I've presented in the previous 2 episodes, and then I'll present my, final conclusion about the function of the structure, and we'll see if we can find kind of what I'm looking for. All right, so let's pull back a little bit, and then we will do some orientation here. Let's spin this guy around. There we go. So we can look at this from the perspective that we've been seeing in the diagrams. So here, the temple of Quetzalcoatl, our feathered serpent deity, this lightning god, was revered, worshipped, feared, and was the inspiration for ancient technology all across the planet. We have the Serpent Temple Complex at Avebury. We have the dragons of ancient Japan, and we have this feathered serpent deity of Mesoamerica, all 3 representing the lightning god, which in mythology across the planet is directly connected to rain, fertilization, i.e. atmospheric nitrate fertilizers that are produced during lightning storms, and agriculture. Of course, there is a connection between the lightning god and agriculture, but not just from the perspective of rain and the nourishment of crops, but we've also looked into the deeper esoteric aspect of their knowledge of these atmospheric nitrate fertilizers and the construction of specific technological systems that utilize these earth forces for the production of these atmospheric nitrate fertilizers being specifically allocated. This is why you have stone circles all over the planet. I was recently looking at a stone circle complex in Peru and an avenue of stones. It looks like, again, anything that you took out of the UK, England, Ireland, or Japan in Mesoamerica. So they have these things, I would say tens of thousands of these structures all around the world. And they were doing that to fertilize crops using atmospheric nitrates from lightning. So let's zoom in a little bit. Again, I haven't done this yet, so this will be a very interesting investigation for me to see the extant components of the temple complex, because there's some other things that we need in this temple complex to make the whole thing work. Okay, so here, San Juan River, okay, a source of water running directly below the site. And we know that they've found wells adjacent to these pyramids, again, basically water wells that tap into this subterranean water supply. Here we have the Avenue of the Dead. This, the Pyramid of the Moon. Here, the Pyramid of the Sun. And here, our Quetzalcoatl, feathered serpent deity, lightning obelisk temple. And I was saying in the previous episode how there is most likely, running below this Avenue of the Dead and all throughout the entire structure, again, all these rectangular and square areas that you can see around here, these were all ancient structures, all in through here. And there's absolutely, in my opinion, subterranean channels running below this entire thing, connecting all of these structures. And here, again, looking at this now, I cannot help but see the similarity between this central Hotep, and I'm using that word specifically, and the Hotep at the Temple of Abu Ghraib in Egypt. And it really does kind of look like, again, I love the tilt feature. Again, not going to get us a great, yeah, that does give a pretty good depth perception. Again, connecting all of these things. And it absolutely does seem, like with these stairs here, I would love to get some magnetic readings at this structure. Again, we've seen that some of these structures across the ancient world utilize this high voltage electric current to induce magnetism. I did have an interesting, sorry about that if you can hear the beeping in the background, it's laundry day here in Japan. I had a comment that mentioned that Teotihuacan, all of these structures are permeated with mica. They found tons of mica embedded within all of these structures, which immediately made sense to me. If you remember my research about the central altar, they call it the altar stone, but it is a pillar or obelisk, menhir, standing stone, at the center of Stonehenge, the one that was brought from Scotland. They dragged this piece of stone. So the majority of stuff at Stonehenge is sarsen stone, high silica content sandstone. Then you have the blue stones, which are a mixture of different stones. They aren't blue. That's the general nomenclature used to describe a variety of different types of stone that they refer to as blue stones. There was some andesite. I forget the geological composition of all those blue stones, but the central pillar obelisk stone is extremely high mica content. And they dragged, or however they moved it, this massive piece of stone all the way from Scotland because of the high mica content. Mica, still today, is a material that we use for high voltage applications. It is an extremely good dielectric material with good thermal properties as well, which they use that mica in this structure for that exact purpose. Again, the distribution of high voltage current through this system that was insulated, and the heat thereof was retained in this mica. So what I want to do here, again, so let's review. The lightning strikes our Quetzalcoatl temple here. The electric current from that is distributed throughout the temple complex. Again, in the previous episode, we talked about that. Again, I hate the diagram because, History Channel or whoever produced that thing, just because you make a comparison between two things, that is absolutely meaningless unless you provide context and mechanisms of operation that explain how it works. Like, oh, Quetzalcoatl and a circuit board, therefore Quetzalcoatl is circuit board because it looks similar. Well, that's meaningless unless you explain how it works, which is exactly what I did in the previous episode. So that high voltage electric current is distributed throughout the temple complex, going into the pyramid of the sun, into the pyramid of the moon, and the heat energy for that. So again, remember here below the temple of Quetzalcoatl, they found the tunnels that contain the pools of Mercury. Now, I'm extremely skeptical about that because there are zero pictures. Not that I'm skeptical about the discovery. There's something, I don't know, sketchy going on about the archaeology here at the site. There are zero pictures of these pools of Mercury. All of the pictures that I've seen of the archaeological excavations, no one is wearing PPE down in these tunnels. And if there's pools of Mercury, you definitely need a breathing mask of some sort. Nobody's wearing a mask. Nobody's wearing PPE. So how many of these pools are they? How big are they? Why are there not pictures of this? Anything having to do with liquid mercury. How did the liquid mercury get down in there? Were guys just carrying it down in bowls? That doesn't sound like a very smart thing to do. However, in terms of the function of the site that I've been proposing, if you were just taking cinnabar, mercury ore, sticking it down in the housings in these tunnels, the Temple of Quetzalcoatl gets struck by lightning. There's a ton of heat energy, which is going to release that liquid mercury from the cinnabar ore. All of this electricity is going to course through that tunnel system, releasing the liquid mercury from the cinnabar ore. That's exactly what we do to produce liquid mercury now by distilling cinnabar ores. You put it in a receptacle, you heat the receptacle, the mercury will vaporize off, it condenses, and it pools out into liquid mercury. So that's what I think was happening below the Temple of Quetzalcoatl. And it would certainly make a lot of sense if that mercury ore, again, this is where more archaeological investigation would be necessary to corroborate this hypothesis. There would have to be tunnels. Again, we saw evidence that there's ancillary transverse tunnels. So we have the main tunnel running in this direction here, and there's evidence of transverse tunnels running in this direction. Those transverse tunnels, they would need to be going downhill, which is an important thing. Let's take a look at this here and maybe spin our heading around a little bit. Yeah, so from here to here, you would want your tunnel slightly angled downhill. And you would need to be producing a lot of mercury ore. This is a long distance. And you would need to pack that tunnel full of mercury ore for this part to work. Again, we have absolutely zero archaeological evidence on this, which is why I've never formalized an official hypothesis on this site. We know, according to the archaeologists, they found all this mercury under here. It doesn't make sense to go in and manually collect the mercury. So there had to be a way to get it from here over to here to process the gold ore. Is it possible that they had some sort of breathing apparatus or mask back then? Sure. We see evidence of basically what I would call scuba gear all across the ancient world, where people had taken inflated, basically bladders filled with air and used them as, a scuba tank, essentially. Or you could have your air pipe coming from above ground, where you're just breathing fresh air from above ground. You're breathing through a little pipe and breathing the air from above and not being contaminated with mercury vapor. So there's certainly a way to do it manually. Intuitively, that doesn't make sense. You would want the whole complex to work without manual intervention. But again, we're sort of speculating here. You would want that mercury, liquid mercury, to flow down in through here, and it would amalgamate the gold out of the gold ore and the same out of the silver ore. However, once you have that amalgamated liquid, it would need to be moved into an ancillary complex where that mercury again could be distilled off, leaving you with the gold sponge. And that's what I think the rest of these ancillary structures in the facility are for the further processing of this amalgamated ore. So that's kind of the final conclusion of my hypothesis on the function of the Teotihuacan complex. The Temple of Quetzalcoatl was for producing the liquid mercury that from cinnabar ore. That liquid mercury was then moved. Feel free to speculate about how you think that liquid mercury was moved. Again, it doesn't make a lot of sense to be sending people down in there to collect it. Again, it's almost as bad as Egyptian archaeology. The fact that there's no documentation. Take a picture. Why are there no pictures of this mercury? It's a little bit frustrating. And I'm sure there's a book somewhere about Teotihuacan that possibly one of these archaeologists has written. Again, I haven't really done a ton of research into Teotihuacan. It's just not been on my list of objectives until it was requested on the channel. I've always focused on the Egyptian pyramids, and then I have a keen interest in stone circles and passage chamber mounds. So long story short, that liquid mercury is then used within the Pyramid of the Sun and the Pyramid of the Moon for the extraction of gold and silver metal from their respective ores. Now, my primary objective for today, I have a suspicion about the area surrounding the Teotihuacan complex. So we're going to close this. I'm going to pull back a little bit. And I already see it. All right, you guys know what it is yet? Of course, there's one, and it's super close. Holy shit! I'm glad I did this, and you guys just got to see my reaction live. I haven't done this yet. It's very, very exciting. All right, so let's change the tilt a little bit here. I was hoping that I would find this, and it's super close. And if my hypothesis is correct about lightning striking this thing, there should be one of these close by. So now we're going to take a look around. Let's look, okay, because I already saw it. Let's just spin around here in this direction. Again, we have our Teotihuacan complex here in the center. Quetzalcoatl, lightning obelisk temple, pyramid of the sun, pyramid of the moon. And we're going to take a look around. I didn't see this. But there's a big old mountain over here. Let's take a look and see what this is. Cerro Gordo. Cerro. I want to say that's pig. Something fat pig mountain. I forget what Cerro is. But it's got a nice flat top up here. But this isn't what I was looking at. Let's find our Quetzalcoatl temple. Here we go. Okay, so again, pyramid of the moon, pyramid of the sun, Quetzalcoatl temple. This isn't what I had spotted. Let's look a little bit more in this direction. Here we go. Yep. Okay, so remember from episode 137, the White Horse Hills. Let me look around here a little bit more. Okay. Got another mound structure here. We've got a big, look at this eroded. Remember my episode on the Hellfire Caves? And how there was a huge lightning carved riverbed running from the White Horse Hill. Look at this. It's got the same scalloped horseshoe. It may even be here. It's a White Horse Hill. It may be this one over here, this big mountain, because this has a nice flat top, but this one is what immediately caught my attention. Is this here. This one in particular. This feature here. Yeah, because it's got this big horseshoe here. You can see this eroded channel running down through here. Let's back up a little bit. And let's find the Pyramid of the Sun again. Okay, Pyramid of the Sun is here. Interesting. Okay, so we have the Teotihuacan complex here. Pyramid of the Moon, Pyramid of the Sun, Quetzalcoatl Temple. We got our White Horse Hill over here. This channel runs down through here. It also comes down in this direction. And I believe this is the same river. Look at that. Yeah. Yeah, it's the same river that runs through here. And then this, I mean, that's even more of a all right, so all of this is just screaming electric universe geology. That there were, and now that I look at it, I like this one over here. This one certainly has a much bigger flat surface at the top. Let's again take a look at this guy here. I mean, this thing screams electric universe geology. This whole structure. So again, we have your complex over here, this huge mound. So basically, I was hypothesizing that somewhere in the area surrounding the temple complex, so we've actually got several features here. Okay, so Teotihuacan is here in the center. And so if you guys enjoy this, we can do this same thing with some other structures, whatever you want me to look at. We'll take a look at it live on Google Earth, and I'll do an unscripted analysis of the site so we can go through this same process. So I like this one. The formation of this very much reminds me of the White Horse Hills in Wiltshire. Let's look at the other side over here. This feature in here specifically, the White Horse Hill, the cumulonimbus thunderstorm generator, the lightning cloud generator. So this whole thing, this big scalloped feature here, is very reminiscent to what we see in Wiltshire with the White Horse Hills. So again, my hypothesis was that if the Teotihuacan complex was a lightning powered structure, there would be a White Horse Hill somewhere in the area. And of course, there are features. I mean, this would be a big one here. Now, it could be the voltage could come through the water. So again, we have this channel here that runs down here, comes around here, Rio San Juan. So again, remember from the Hellfire Caves episode that there is a riverbed that has been etched into the chalk landscape near the Hellfire Cave Hill. And it is blatantly obvious that it is electric universe geology, that riverbed was etched by a high voltage transmission through that chalk dielectric material that transformed the chalk into calcium oxide. When water flowed through that, it created calcium hydroxide, dissolved out that riverbed, and then that's where the river flows now. Because chalk itself is not soluble in water, but calcium oxide absolutely is. So there you have it. That all fits very nicely. So let me close this, and we can pull back a little bit here. Let's get a different angle. Okay, there we go. So you can see kind of both formations there. Here's the Teotihuacan complex. We have this White Horse Hill looking feature over here. And then you got this guy over here. I bet you there's Temple of Clochclocotil. Where is that? Is that on top of the mountain? Look at that. I was about to say, I guarantee you there is an ancient temple at the top of this mountain, or an ancient structure at the top of this mountain. So now I'm super interested to see. So now I got to see what it is. Temple of Hochchitil. Temple of Hochchitil. See if we can find any images here. Oh, look at that. Got a little pyramid structure, pyramid of flowers behind a monolithic basin. Oh, look at that. On the Serpent Building. Look at that. Pyramid of flowers behind a monolithic basin on the Serpent Building at Luchtekal. Look at that. All right. All right, so now I have a little bit more of an interest in this site. Up here in the mountains, this pyramid structure. Yeah, I bet you there was something right at the top of this thing. So it may be this mountain. Doesn't surprise me at all that there's an ancient structure up here. Spin back around. Pull out a little bit. This doesn't have the... And look at all the agricultural terraces. Of course. Right? So you have a temple, a serpent temple pyramid at the top of the mountain, and agricultural terraces, because they wanted to bring the serpent god, Quetzalcoatl, to the mountain to bring lightning, rain, and atmospheric fertilizer. What is this guy? Some weird stuff in here. Look at this guy, too. These agricultural terraces here. This is all agricultural areas. I guarantee that was something, too. All right, so this is why I wanted to do this approach. I love doing Google Earth investigations, looking at the landscape surrounding these structures. Look at this here. Yeah, all of these are very indicative. Temple of Quetzalcoatl. And let's find the Pyramid of the Sun again so we can... Let's look at the whole thing from the top down. So now let's pull back. I mean, look at that. You've got all of these. It's, again, this whole thing screams electric universe geology. This whole area. So you've got that temple pyramid structure here. This huge flat area. This whole thing covered in agricultural terraces. All of these are all terracing, agricultural terraces. Look at all this. Pyramid of the Sun over here. And I still like this one for the White Horse Hill. It has, so there's a certain angle that I'm looking for as well. The same angle as the slope of the Great Pyramid, 51.5 degrees. And this scalloped formation here, I would love to know what the geological composition of this hillside is here. That would also, because again, we want the circulation of hot airflow coming off of this front here, which again, if you remember my videos, it's screaming the formation of that cumulonimbus thunderstorm cloud right here. And then again, the complex right there. All right, that's going to do it for today. Awesome. So for the next video, yeah, we got 30 minutes in this one. I think this is better than a slide presentation. This over here is not as interesting to me in terms of functionality. We've got the complex here, Teotihuacan complex, this one. And of course, I mean, the fact that there's a huge pyramid thing up here with this serpent temple at the top here. Again, they know exactly what these things are for. And anytime you see serpent deity temple, think lightning. All right. Again, Teotihuacan temple complex here. Feathered serpent, Quetzalcoatl, lightning rod temple. Let's take a look at this here. Yeah, the temple of the feathered serpent. And they do have all of these, sort of ancillary buildings in through here. Who knows what's embedded in all of this. I find it hard to believe that this is just solid rock and that there's not stuff in here. These look like platforms where you can go onto you have stairs here where you can go up here, but I bet there's stuff in this. And this whole thing here, behind it, was a facility. This is a building. This is all structure. And I guarantee you there was a big, tall obelisk standing out the top of this thing. Exact same thing that we had at Abu Ghraib. Yep, Pyramid of the Sun. And the Pyramid of the Moon. A lightning-powered liquid mercury, gold and silver ore processing facility equipped with its own White Horse cumulonimbus thunder and lightning storm generator system in direct proximity to a massive plasma discharge electric universe formation. It doesn't get much better than that. So I'm going to keep doing this because I like it. And I think that you guys will like this too because I love doing these Google Earth things. Assessing the landscape around these structures is critical to understanding the function. You can't just look at the one thing and not look at all of the landscape features surrounding it because this really paints, because here's the temple complex here, this paints the whole picture. Awesome.
All right, everyone, that is it for today's video. This was episode 177, the function of the Teotihuacan Pyramid Complex. I really hope you enjoyed today's video, and I have a ton of new research content coming up in the new year, so please subscribe to the Land of Chem here on YouTube if you're interested in the technology of a lost civilization. utilizing physics and chemistry, and the function of the Egyptian pyramids and other ancient structures from around the world. If you want to help support the channel and get access to exclusive research content, check out the members only channel and thelandofchem.com. If you want to pick up a copy of the book or grab some merch, links in the video description below. If you want to follow me on Instagram or on X, my handle is @thelandofchem. Also, don't forget, after you finish watching this video, please go subscribe to our 3 other channels. My wife Alexa's channel, Archeoalchemy, our mutual travel, adventure, and culinary experience channel, Let's Go with Lex and G, and the best channel on YouTube, Egyptian Trash Cats, for all you cat lovers out there. Ladies and gentlemen, as always, thank you all so much for the support. I think that's it for today's episode. So I will see you next time.
Yo, are you still watching this? Please subscribe to The Land of Chem here on YouTube and click that little notification button. New videos coming out every single week. And check out this other episode. Come on, do it. Do it now.